Said to me yesterday, you're too old to say what you just said. So, my sober date is October 10th, 1985. Thanks. And I could have listened to every single one of you for the whole night. So I'm sorry that you didn't get to share longer, because every single one of you, man, I have laughed the whole time, I have cried the whole time, and I got to hold a baby. So my life is complete. I can go now. Oh my gosh, since I only have a little bit of time, I guess, let me start over. Let's have a moment of silence real quick. I am the place where God shines through, for he and I are one, not two. He wants me where and as I am. I need not fret, nor fear, nor plan. If I can be relaxed and free, then he'll perform his work through me. Amen. Amen. So I have a home group, Progress Not Perfection group. We meet Monday mornings, 9:30. It's a women's meeting. We have a babysitter. If you need a babysitter, come to our group. And I'll hold your baby if you don't want to go. If you don't want to put the baby with the sitter. And it's a great group. And what home group means to me today is not what happens from 9:30 to 10:30 on Monday morning. Home group for me today is what happens from 10:30 Monday until the following Monday. Because my home group members are my family, and we do stuff just like this group does together all week long. We carry the message. If somebody's not there, we know it. If somebody's sick, we know it. And I had no idea when it came to Alcoholics Anonymous about home group or anything, sponsorship, none of that stuff. I have a sponsor today. I'm very blessed. I have been blessed in my life with tremendous sponsors. And I sponsor today. And sponsoring women has been the biggest life-changing thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. As a matter of fact, I was reading in Step 5 in the 12 and 12 yesterday, and it had a line in there where it says that my job is to share my fifth step with someone else and then to do the same thing with them. And it's not until I do that do I get to really belong here, right? So I need to carry this message. I need to do these steps with someone else, and then it becomes real for me. And that's the truth. So everybody that got up here was a miracle, and everybody shared about doing the work. And when I got here, I heard you guys talking stuff like that, and I had no idea what you were talking about. Like, I thought I had a drinking problem, and I'm going to come here, and I'm not going to drink anymore, and then my life is going to be great. And I came here, and I didn't drink, and I got to tell you, my life was not great. And I found out that drinking was my solution, not my problem. So the work everybody's talking about is these 12 steps on the wall. But I did the steps on the wall. See, the reason I bring my big book here is this is not a big book meeting, but these steps, for those of you guys that don't know, are written out in great detail with directions and explanation in this book, which I did not read for a very long time, right? And my life didn't get any better. One of the guys I love to listen to says, if you do the steps on the wall, you're going to get an off-the-wall program. And that was me. So I want to share a little bit about what those steps mean to me and what's happened in my life, because I don't have a whole lot of time. But I really want to talk to the people who are new here, who maybe haven't worked the steps, and I really want to talk to the people who are old here. So whether you have 30 days or 30 years, I can only encourage you to get an intimate relationship with a sponsor. Intimate. Like, I thought sponsor I called when I was thinking about drinking. And I found out a sponsor you call when you're thinking about anything, really, anything, like life, because sobriety means life, right? Sober means everything that happens from the minute I wake up until I go to bed, and I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, right? I didn't know how to do any of it. So the first step says that we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. Well, I knew that when I drank, I could not stop drinking. So my first drunk, I was like 11 or 12. I don't remember. I was in 7th grade, I think. And it was New Year's Eve, and I had drank before that. We were allowed to drink in my family, not like throwback Jack Daniels, but we had wine and dinner and whatever. And so it wasn't my first drink, but it was my first drunk. And we all got smashed, right? We drank a little bit of everything in the liquor closet, and I finished up with something chocolate, which is only relevant because usually what went down came back up with me. And sometime during the night before I got sick, and before I blacked out, and before I passed out, which I did almost every time I drank, I went in the bathroom. And I have to tell you, this was a long time ago. And I can picture the bathroom. I can picture the house. I can tell you it was a downstairs, single pocket, toilet sink, slider door, pocket door. Right? That's how powerful my first drunk was to me. And I went in that bathroom sometime during the night, and I remember looking in the mirror thinking, and I said to myself, this is how I want to feel. Like that was the first time in my life that the hole in me got filled up. And I didn't even know I had a hole. I mean, like, it was the first time in my life that I felt my feet on the floor. I felt like I could finally exhale all the way. I didn't get beautiful. I didn't get smart. I got pukey and ugly. And I did embarrassing things. I felt fantastic. I couldn't wait to do it again. It was magic. It was magic. And what my big book tells me about being powerless over alcohol is that when I put it in me, I can't predict what's going to happen to me. Number one, I have a physical allergy. But even more important, if that's all I had, I just wouldn't drink, right? I just had all this allergy testing. I went to an AA conference this year, and we all went out to dinner at this restaurant. And halfway through the meal, I'm like, my lips swollen. And by the end of the meal, I couldn't talk, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of alcoholic nurses and who managed my life quite well. So anyway, I'm allergic to all these things now, which I never had been my whole entire life. I can tell you, when I go to a restaurant now, I ask what's in the food, right? I ask. Not with my allergy to alcohol, because I have this mental obsession that brings me back to drinking every time. No matter how embarrassed I was that morning, no matter how bad I screwed up, and I was never going to do it again by 4 o'clock that afternoon, it sounds like a really great idea. And I just changed my mind, or whatever, right? Because it was going to be different this time. Didn't matter. That's what that means. And I thought it said that I was powerless over alcohol, and because I drank too much, my life was unmanageable. I am powerless over alcohol, separate thought. My life is unmanageable. So whether I'm drinking or not drinking, my life is unmanageable. I need a manager. I got to step out of the management position, right? So the second step says, come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, what happened to me is drinking was magic, and I was quite young, so I didn't drink every day, right? But when I was in 6th grade, we moved from Missouri to Iowa. And I had gone to a really small parochial Catholic school. And that was my first year in a public school. And my whole school before that had like 100 kids. And this school had 100 kids in 6th grade. And it was a public school, so they brought in probably us. I have no idea. They were speakers from the outside, and this is what I remember. And did I mention my mom was a drinker, and I was never going to be like my mom? My mother embarrassed me. I can't tell you how much. I was never going to be like her. And they came in, and I remember them saying that it doesn't matter how much you drink, it's matter what happens to you when you drink. And I went home, and I told my mother that these people came to school. And they talked all about alcoholism, and they said it doesn't matter how much you drink, because what happens to you when you drink. You could be just a weekend drinker and still be an alcoholic. I can still remember telling my mother that. And within a year, I'm a weekend drinker. Within a year, I'm drinking every weekend. And all of a sudden, and this is the thing about alcoholism. I can stand in front of Trisha and I can say, my sweater is brown. And by the end of the night, I can be convinced my sweater is blue. And I can get 3 of my friends to agree with me too, because I'm good at that, right? So that's my disease, because I tell my mother, if you drink just on the weekends, you can be an alcoholic. And then I'm drinking every weekend, and I go, well, you must have to drink every day. And then I'm drinking every day, and I go, well, you must have to drink in the mornings, right? It's the progression of our disease. I don't think twice about changing my mind about that kind of stuff. So we lived in Iowa, and I don't have a whole lot of time to get into that story, but my mother, not only did she drink, but she suffered from panic and anxiety disorder. So she didn't really like to leave the house very much, and she didn't drive. And so when I was 14 in Iowa, if you were a good student, which I was, you could get a driver's license to drive. To school, to work, whatever. So at 14, I got a license to drive myself to school every day. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been 14, but I think most of you have. And if you have any kids, does that make you cringe? Like, oh my God, my daughter's 17, and I'm like, you shouldn't be driving. So at 14, I'm driving and drinking and picking up all my friends in the morning and not understanding why they don't want to get trashed before school starts. So I'm a real alcoholic. Alcohol is my number one choice of anything I would ever do. But what happened to me is I surrounded myself with a lot of other people, and I found out that if I did other things, well, let me put it this way. I never once asked what that would do to me until after I took it. And what happened was that kind of microwaved my life, and I got here a lot quicker. And I could not do all that stuff unless I drank. But the minute I drank, I did all that stuff. Like alcohol let down the floodgates. And my life got really crazy really fast. And I'll just share the last bit because the sober part's pretty good. But my last year of drinking, I worked at an arcade in the evening, and my girlfriend worked there during the daytime, and she had a baby. And I would pick her up in the morning. I don't know why she doesn't have a car. I can't remember. And her boyfriend would be beating her or throwing her around, and we'd have to climb out the window because he'd be blocking the door, and we'd shove the baby through the window, and we'd get to work, and that was somehow normal in my life. And I would drop her at the arcade, and I would take her baby all day, and then at the end of the day, I would work at the arcade at night. And her only rule for me was that if I was going to do anything besides drink, I had to put the baby in another room. That was my rule for the day. So I drank and drove that entire period with that baby in the car every day. And my parents raised me with morals and values. They did. My father was in the seminary before he married my mother. They had very strong faith. They had very strong belief that there was a loving God. They raised us to do right. They raised us to try hard. They raised us to work hard. And I knew what was right from wrong. But I have to tell you, I had no power over what I did that was right or wrong. I did a lot of things that year. I ended up with a lot of people I never intended on being with, doing a lot of things I never intended on doing. And I knew that I shouldn't be doing any of it, but I couldn't help it. I was powerless, and my life was unmanageable. So eventually, the area that I lived in, a lot of people, treatment centers were really big in the 80s. It was huge. And a bunch of people kept disappearing, these people we'd hang out with. Like, they'd be there and then they'd be gone, right? And I'd be like, where are they? Well, they were incarcerated in treatment. And I called up this girl one day, and I just told her, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And there's a whole story. If any of you guys have ever tried to quit drinking, like, you know, right? I'm never going to do it again. I swear to God, it's going to be different this time. And I made it 3 weeks one time or 2 weeks, and I celebrated by drinking because I proved that I could do it. I have learned since then that is an alcoholic trait. Like, my husband has never once celebrated not drinking. He's also never had a drinking dream. Non-alcoholics generally don't wake up going, oh my God, did I drink last night? They don't do it, right? So anyway, this girl said, I can't help you, but I know somebody who can. And some guy picked me up and brought me to an AA meeting, which I was not sober when I went to because I was horrified. I was horrified to come be with you people. And I couldn't do that sober. I couldn't do anything sober. I was horrified. I thought I was bad, man. I thought I was something. I was tough and fierce, and we rode motorcycles and did all this stuff, and I was a weenie. I was scared of everything. And anyway, long story short, I couldn't stay sober. I went to a treatment center, got out of that treatment center, and in that treatment center, we had to do a fourth step. Now, I'm not skipping step 3, but I have to tell you, that power in step 2 really messed with me, right? Like, I didn't think I could do that power thing. I don't want a power. I don't like the power. I know there's a power. There's a power out there. That power is keeping a set of books waiting for me to screw up one more time so I can burn in hell forever. That's what that power is doing. And I'm not going to that power for any help because I know there's a God and that God doesn't like me. And if that God liked me, all the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid, which you would wish would never happen on anybody or never happen to your own children, would never have happened to me. If God loved me, those things would never have happened to me. If God loved me, I wouldn't be an alcoholic. If God loved me, my mother wouldn't be a drunk. I mean, my list could go on. Those were all the reasons why I was an alcoholic, by the way. which I found out weren't true either. I'm an alcoholic because I have a physical allergy to alcohol. I have met people that had all the same things happen to them as kids that I had happen. Do you know what? They're not alcoholic. That's bizarre, right? But the problem is if it's my drinking, I can stop drinking and my life is great. If it's all the stuff that happened to me when I'm a kid, I can go to therapy and act like a lady and I can drink. But I got this whole thing, right? I've got the whole thing, body, mind, and spirit. So in this treatment center, we had to do a 4-step to get out of there. This is really the only thing I remember. And I remember I had a big book. I still have that big book. And in the big book, they have those 3 columns listed. And I listed those 3 columns. I had a great time writing that inventory because I got to write down everything you did to me and how it affected me. It was wonderful. If you're afraid to do your 4-step, I don't know what you're afraid of. And I had pages and pages and pages of what they did to me. And somebody from AA came in on a Sunday and sat with me for a couple hours and listened to all my stuff. And when I was all done, she said, "Oh, you poor thing." And I said, my people, they understand, right? Because I felt my poor thing my whole life. I was a victim my whole life. I had a big V on my forehead. Well, I found out I didn't really do a 4th or 5th step eventually. So I got out of that treatment center and started going to AA, and I was horrified. And what I did was I just hung out with all the same people I hung out with. We weren't drinking. We changed nothing, except for we drank a lot of coffee, ate a lot of pie, and got into a lot of trouble. And what I found out the first 2 years of sobriety is that if I don't find something to fill that hole, which turns out it is a power, but if I don't find something to fill that hole, I will fill it with something or someone. And that first 2 years of sobriety, I ended up in like 3 more treatment centers, the psych ward, I ended up in intensive care, you name it. I was destroying myself, and I took nothing from the neck up. Nothing that affected me from the neck up. But I was in so much pain, I could not stand life. I couldn't stand sobriety. I needed relief, right? So I did that for a while. And long story short, I eventually got an intimate relationship with a sponsor. And I will tell you what I found out when I did that is my first sponsor, Mary, my first real sponsor. I had many people try to sponsor me. If you guys have sponsor hopped, I feel for you. You know, if the grass is greener over there, if you get one so somebody will leave you alone. I had 2 of those because I wanted people to stop asking me if I had a sponsor. It's that lady over there or it's whatever. But when I finally got that real sponsor, and she said to me, I met her at a big book study, and she said, I want you to take your big book, and I want you to read the doctor's opinion. I want you to write down any words you don't understand, and which was ridiculous because I was so smart. I don't know why she would say that to me. And she said, and we'll discuss it. And I can still remember sitting at her kitchen counter. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And we read it together. Even though I had read it, she told me to read it. We read it together. And we got to that line where it says, drinks they see others taking with impunity. And she paused, for effect, I'm sure. And she looked at me and she goes, do you know what that means? And I said, well, of course. And she goes, what does it mean? And I went, I don't know. Because I bluffed my whole life. I bluffed my whole life. I acted like I was fine. I acted like I knew everything. I acted like I didn't need your help. I acted like I had it all together. And that was the first time anybody had ever said, do you know what that means? And that's what I mean about an intimate relationship with a sponsor. That was the first time in my life I told somebody I didn't know. I didn't know. Because I just make some crap up. And I'd make it look good. So you leave me alone. She changed my life. By her giving me her time, knee to knee, she changed my life. She and her husband Dave, I can still remember. I don't know about this God thing, like I'm really struggling, right? And right before this, I'd had this experience, well, a little bit before, where I knew I needed to find a power because you kept saying it. And I had a couple years sober, and I'm coming to meetings, and I am in pain. And I got to the point where I was either going to drink or die. And I knew I couldn't drink, so suicide was looking like an option. And I decided that instead of doing that first, I'd go back to church and I'd give God a chance to make amends to me. And so I went to church for I would say 6 times maybe. Sunday morning church 6 times. And by the end of the 6 times, I had a list of all the stuff they were doing that was wrong in this church. And I don't remember doing this, but I guess I made an appointment to speak with somebody at the church. And I went that day, and they invited me in. Hello, and I said, hi, I'm Suzanne. I have an appointment here. And this woman said, okay, they're ready for you. You can go on in. And I walked in, and it was a Catholic priest waiting for me. And if I'd known it would have been a Catholic priest, because he probably knew this God that was waiting for me to burn in hell, I would never have gone. Would never have gone. And he said, can I help you? And I burst into tears, which I did probably every day for my first, I don't know how many years. I cried at everything. He said, can I help you? And I said, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm coming to your church, and these are all the things that you're doing that are upsetting me. And I gave him the whole list. And when I finally got done blubbering, he looked at me and he said, do you have a sponsor? So anyway, I got Mary to be my sponsor, and Mary and Dave really believed in this God thing. And Mary, really believed. She'd look at me all the time and she'd go, do you believe that I believe? And I'd be like, oh, Mary, you believe, all right. She believed, and her husband Dave would be like, okay, God is like the wind, right? You can't see the wind, but you can see the effects of the wind. He would say stuff like that. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I prayed to Mary's God. I did the third step prayer. Oh, I could cry. You guys already made me cry so many times tonight. On my knees in her house, intimate relationship. And I said, dear Mary's God, will you help me? Because he had helped her. And I thought if he helped her, maybe he'd have a little bit of time for me. And I did the fourth step. And what I found was all that stuff I did about who they were, what they did to me, and how it affected me was great. But if you actually read the book, you turn the page. And then it says, putting out of my mind all the wrongs they have done. Where have I been at fault? So my mother, I hated my mother. And I was a bad child, and I was a bad daughter. But she was a worse mother. And that was my inventory. And I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that I don't get to judge my behavior based on yours. The book says I put out of my mind the wrongs others have done. And I resolutely look at where I was wrong. So what's really funny when you do this inventory, my mother on my inventory was cold, calculated, mean, judgmental, spiteful. I had a bunch more things too, right? Those were the things on there against my mother. How am I doing? Okay. Am I okay? Thank you. Oh. So what you find when you get to that other column and you sit with a sponsor is that I was everything I judged my mother for being. And that's what makes me get to stand with you side by side, is because I find out you're just like me and I'm just like you. And that we're all the same. It shows up a little different, right? We all show up a little bit differently. So I just want to tell you that it has been a crazy ride. I've been informed I have 2 minutes to now share with you 30-some years of sobriety. So, Luke, there's not a greater honor than to stand at a podium and have your spouse tell you that they adore you. There's not a greater honor. And I am married to someone who adores me today. He's got Chris on butt dial. He's not in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's constantly 12-stepping people. He's like, I got to go to the Friday night meeting. I told the guy I'd meet him there. But he knows you guys. And he passes them on to people who can help him. And that, to me, it's just adorable. It's just adorable. But and I just congratulate every single one of you who got up here. There is nothing I love better than to watching you grow up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have gotten to witness the baby bump all the way through and sit next to the baby bump at a meeting and then hold the baby. What an honor, right? I've gotten to watch the progression of sobriety. It's such a miracle. It's such a miracle. So I'm really grateful, and thank you so much for asking me to speak today.